Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second Siteimprove session. I hope, as I noticed, most of you stayed in the room from the first one. We had a very engaged session, and I hope this one goes just as well. I'm Lucy Greco. I am the accessibility lead for UC. I am the UC Berkeley Accessibility Evangelist. Please welcome and enjoy, and thank you for coming to our second Siteimprove session to learn some more tips and tricks on how to use Siteimprove to become more accessible.
All right. Thank you, Lucy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I am Christina Adams. I work for Siteimprove. I am the accessibility solution expert slash senior digital accessibility software engineer slash, I don't know, whatever you want to call me, but I specialize in technical accessibility, especially the coding aspects of it, but I also come from a design background. So pretty much if you have a question about how to implement something, I'm a person. You can come ask me. I also have Travis, who also works with me here. So he might field some questions here as well for us if we have any. So we're going to talk about how to identify and remediate priority accessibility issues. I'm curious, what kind of roles do we have in the room and maybe online? Like, are you a developer, designer, project owner, all the things, everything, all the things? I have on all the things. Anybody else? Front-end developer? Excellent. Cool, good. So I am going to start off with some slides. They're kind of, I'd say high level. We're going to start talking about what do we mean when we say priority? How would you maybe decide if they are a priority issue as you go about it? And then if we want, we can go into code. We could talk about theory, whatever you want. I want this session to be meaningful for you. So start with some slides, but feel free to interrupt me. If you have a question, raise your hand. We do have a microphone that we will pass around the room when you do have a mic, so the online folks can hear your question as well. But yeah, feel free, and also for those online to post them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll catch them when we see them. Sound good? Awesome, cool. So I have to be in the right window. Okay, so what issues are a priority? Let's just start with that. Big thought bubble on the screen. What do we mean when we say priority issue when we're talking about digital accessibility? This is starting off maybe with the most controversial thing, right? This is somewhat based in opinion, depending on who you are talking to. What is a priority? From my perspective as the consultant here to represent the user experience, I'm going to say the things that cause the most friction for your users. That may not always be your business priority, and I understand that. I used to work in higher ed as well as a front-end developer, and sometimes there's just stuff out of our control, unfortunately. So it's kind of my position to come work with you on a case-by-case scenario. But at a high level, let's talk about what we mean by a priority issue. One way of determining if an issue is a priority or not is the WCAG conformance level. The WCAG conformance level relates directly. We have A, AA, and AAA within that, and the WCAG, sorry, acronyms. We were talking about this earlier. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is created by the World Wide Web Consortium of user groups and professionals in the industry deciding on what is important. So when we look at the Siteimprove platform here, which is the image on the screen, and this is just the accessibility issues list when you dive in, right? We have a column that says conformance, and it has a letter A, AA, or AAA next to it. There's also a thing with SI and ARIA. SI is Siteimprove best practices. ARIA is actually the ARIA guidelines, which is separate from the WCAG standards, right? It's a tool to create accessible web experiences. And I could talk for probably 3 hours on that if you wanted to. But WCAG level A is the kind of the baseline. And that is affecting the most users. Those are generally accepted as the issues that are going to cause the most problems for the most people. So we maybe want to prioritize those first. They tend to be the things that cause that you're going to get complaints on. They're also sometimes the easiest to fix. So not always, of course, but they tend to be fairly straightforward, fairly easy. These are things like alternative text on images, links with descriptive names, color, really basic, like fundamental kind of built-in things about your site. This is kind of where they lie. When we start talking about level 2 and level 3, they all build upon each other. So level A, if we're looking for double A conformance, we are going to first address our single A and then build upon that and solve double A. So it's not just the double A, it is all of them as they stack on top of each other. That's a common question I get. So yes, so starting with A makes sense just for that perspective. If we're talking to our business about double A conformance, which is usually where the legislation stands, we need to address A and double A to meet double A conformance. Got it? Am I going too deep already? Feelings check in, we're good? Okay, awesome. Okay, so that is one way of deciding what is a priority when I'm looking at this giant list of issues. Another is maybe the most detrimental to users, and this is where you need to take a little bit of an analytic approach, right? Siteimprove platform, we do offer a column in this issues list that says abilities affected, and we have things like vision and color perception vision, cognitive vision, reading vision, and so on, and different combinations of those per issue. And that is honestly on our part a generalization, but that's the kind of analytical approach we need to take in thinking about the friction these issues might cause for our end users. This might help you start, would be my suggestion. You might have to dive a little bit deeper into that and think about assistive technologies, things like screen readers, keyboard users, etc. That would all fit here as to who might be affected by this issue. I tend to stray this way. I prioritize by this column usually if I'm looking at the Siteimprove platform or any sort of accessibility report. I have a modal window on the screen. I am being signed out. Is that a problem? Being signed out of your Zoom meeting is part of it. Timing, enough time is one of the success criteria. I think we just experienced this. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I have a mouse. Okay. Are we still online? Can people see the screen still? Okay. Hopefully. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. All right. Okay, another way we can talk about high priority issues is in the occurrences. We have an occurrences column in this issues list as well. This one, again, this is going to be you and your team deciding what is a priority, what is not. Sometimes the low-hanging fruit is great, right? It's a great way to make progress in addressing your accessibility issues. Sometimes, though, you want to wipe out as many occurrences as possible. So I tend to prioritize things at the template level. If I'm seeing a lot of occurrences of one thing across a lot of different pages, even if it's a lot of things on one page, I probably want to address that sooner than later because it's the volume is creating more problems, right? The volume of negative user experience is causing your users to not be happy. It's causing barriers to exist for folks who are just trying to use your content, right? So high number of occurrences, you can also sort by that column in the Siteimprove platform. It's very handy, quite honestly. Jump in if you have comments. Another one featuring occurrences here is a consistent number of occurrences. So again, we have our screenshot of the issues list in the Siteimprove platform, but you'll notice that in that occurrences column where we have a couple of issues, there's always 2 occurrences. Every single page has 2 occurrences of this problem. I'm gonna guess that that's a template, right? That's something that exists on all of my sites or all of my pages within my site. And I probably can address it with one fix. It's an assumption. It's not always true. But if I can solve this with one piece of work, that's going to be huge for the wiping out this problem site-wide, right? So that could be a priority. Again, this is going to be a question you're going to have to ask yourself and your team as you go prioritize this work, as you decide what to work on. This is something I would move higher up the list if I have control over it. Following me so far? We're good. Okay. I'm going to check in with people's feelings as we go. Want to make sure everybody's good. Okay, so how do we determine if it is an issue? This is an automated scan, right? The Siteimprove platform is a crawler. It will find all of the linked pages within your site, and it will run our accessibility automated checks against them. That's it. It's a machine. It's saying yes or no to your code base, primarily. Sometimes it messes up, to be totally honest. There are probably a million ways we can build anything in HTML and CSS. There's a ton of options. There's always going to be a creative use of some CSS, and I put that in scare quotes for those of you who can't see me. So sometimes the computer, the script that's behind that check goes, I am certain that this is wrong. And in reality, it's not a negative user experience. It's just the way you coded it wasn't expected, right? So keep that in mind as you're doing it. However, I will say that true false positives, as we call it, and we'll dive into that a little bit, are pretty rare. There are a couple of places where they do come up, but if you just disagree with the check, that's maybe another conversation we need to have. but most of the time the check is finding things accurately, I will say, unless you took some creative liberties with how you did your front end development on the site. So keep that in mind. It's not always wrong. Sometimes it's a support issue. Sometimes it's a crawler issue. We're going to dive through some of those examples here and then determine if it truly is a false positive or not. Is there a question?
We have a question.
All right.
From Nicholas Botto. He says, can you sort by ranking and occurrences or filter by ranking and sort by occurrence? So you could prioritize an issue with the highest number of occurrences.
Yes. Yeah. All of those columns. Let me go back. All of the columns here that we're seeing in the Siteimprove platform screenshot are filterable. You can sort by those. And Travis, do you want to add to that? Travis is the platform expert.
So this is Travis and the platform expert. Do you want to go back one more slide? Because something else that I don't see a ton, and it ties in with the different columns and that what we have out here. It's something that our platform set up for, but page segmentation. So we have the ability to, you can see responsibility out there, element type. Working with our support team, we have the ability to, and I want to call it out, it's not out of the box, but to say, show me just the header section, or show me just the footer, show me just the body content. If you have the proper, and this is where I'm going to use the wrong technical term, but landmarks, unless that is that. Yeah.
Good
if you have
job.
the proper landmarks marked up on your web page, we can help segment on that. And then you'd be able to filter on those landmarks. And that can, again, be really beneficial to know what team should be getting this issue. Is it a content author? Are we sending this to UX or dev? But again, something to investigate after.
Yep. Yeah. You can
Do both.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah. Yep. So totally configurable. It is by you filtering those columns or customizing the view, right, within the Siteimprove platform, you're not messing anything up for anybody else. So please do play around with it. It's all yours. You can set it up to view whatever you want. You can add columns. There's a lot of different options within this table that you can decide you don't want in there or do want in there in order to help you streamline your process. Okay, so let's talk about if it's an issue or not. In every page report in the Siteimprove platform, once you click into an occurrence, so you see that line in the table, that's an issue. If you click into it, you will get to our page report, it is called. It will show you the full page on the right side of the screen. On the left side of the screen, there's a column that will tell you what the issue is. It has a description at the top of it that gives you some hints about what the check is looking for. And then it also has linked resources that will bring you not only to Help Center articles, WCAG, success criterion text from the W3C itself, but also our exact technical reference document is always linked down there. So if you really want to dig into the weeds and hear some real computery language, go there. It's great. But so in this case, what I have up there is a very common issue that I get questions on daily, I'd say, is text is clipped when resized. This happens, essentially what the check is looking for in this case is a container element that has overflow hidden on it, right, in CSS. What the check is doing is essentially saying, you've eliminated the opportunity for text to overflow this box, which can cause problems when you zoom with the browser as well as zoom your font sizes. That's not always immediately clear when you just see text is clipped when resized, because most people will go to their browser, hit the plus sign, make it 200% and go, it's fine, right? But there's a lot of technical aspects into that check where the browser does a certain thing with its zoom, but if you change the default font size of your browser, it behaves differently. So you have to test both things in order to verify if this is an issue or not. So this is one of the most common false positive reports I get. And yes, I get them, me, I do. So this is one of the most common ones I get. And it's because people forget the second step of testing with default font size within browsers, which you can force in Firefox. So it's not optional. Go ahead, Travis.
You just touched base on it, but I was going to ask you to comment on the different browsers, because you and I have had conversations, and she does the testing of the false positives.
do.
So,
I have to go through each
Uh,
one.
but yeah, because we've talked about Chrome before, Firefox. I'm like, well, it works here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I can maybe show you an example, perhaps, if that's interesting. I don't want to get stuck too hard on one check, right? But yeah, this is one that frequently comes up. Do we have a question? Yeah, absolutely. Wait for the mic though, if we.
Hi, everyone. Gary, UC Irvine, Ruby developer.
Yeah.
And my question is, you mentioned it does like a web scraping to figure out all the different ways fail. So did you say it's going through our code base to figure this out, and you guys programmed it to pick up overflow hidden? Like if there's an overflow hidden, it's going to pop for this.
Yes.
Do you guys do anything where it's actually going through like the HTML side?
Yeah. And that is what I mean by code base. It is,
Oh, okay,
it is
okay.
the computed
Right.
HTML and CSS.
So it's
property.
whatever outputs.
Yep.
Okay, that's okay.
Yep.
That's
So
really
not your
and
development files.
And
no.
so like something like the text clipping, the 200%, will you guys run for that test? Let's pop up the size on the browser 200% and see if we can click on, like, see if there's a way to get that selector. Does that make sense?
Yes, we do not currently. So the only thing the check is doing, because it's just a script.
Right.
It is using the computed values of CSS. So we're not doing like an automated browser render
Right.
at this current point in time. So this is one that frequently needs double checking, even though it is an automated check.
It's still very cool. Like
Yeah.
this stuff's amazing. Like I want to say thank you
Yeah,
a lot for this.
Awesome.
Like,
I didn't build
super,
it.
super useful to me right now.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. So this is a good automated test, though, I will say, for finding that overflow hidden CSS property within your site, because a lot of legacy code bases have this everywhere. I mean, I don't know why it populated so drastically. I think you probably had an issue maybe with responsive clear fix. Yeah, that's right. Correct. Okay, so it's a clear fix issue for floated elements in CSS, but Flexbox is better. Yes. Got it. Yeah, I vaguely remember that. I abandoned float as soon as Flex came out. So yeah, I haven't written a float in a long time. Yeah. So this is a great way of finding all of those things, and they will cause you problems. I can guarantee it, especially if you are using strict pixel height and width on that container, it will overflow, it will get clipped, it will become illegible. So this is a great way of finding those really quickly, in my opinion. However, there are certain instances where this is incorrect. So I do get false positive reports on this all the time. However, the point of this slide, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, is that before you submit that false positive, before you tell me it's a problem and you end up in my email box, read the description firstly, under the check name. It's amazing how few people actually read it. Actually, it's unbelievable. And then if it still doesn't make sense, because often it doesn't, we have a lot of linked resources under that drop-down menu of why is this an issue? So go look for those answers within those first, I would say, because often there's a technique or a testing, a specific browser you need to test it in, that is you're missing out on. So do all those things first, please, for my sake. No, I'm just kidding. But it is, this is the part of the Siteimprove tool that's really useful in my opinion, because it's trying to educate you and whoever's doing your reviews of these issues. We're giving you the resources here to be the expert in this check or to figure out if this is really a problem or not, right? So I use these still, to be totally honest. Yeah. Oh, browsers. I was going to talk about browsers. Thanks, Travis. Yeah. So this check in particular requires you to test it not only in Chrome, which would be the, the font zoom, or any browser has the zooming capability, and that zooms in your interface. And likely what you're going to see is the mobile viewport being hit. That's because the browser resize, or the browser zoom triggers the resize event within the browser, so that you end up in mobile, right? So a lot of people will go, oh no, it just switches to mobile and we're fine. However, if you modify the default font size within the browser through your preferences in Chrome, but also in Firefox, which forces the issue. Chrome kind of like lets it slide and sometimes doesn't change anything depending on how you've coded your site. Firefox will change it 100% of the time. They have a checkbox that says zoom text only, and it will override everything. Meaning I just made the text of the content of your site bigger by default. This does not trigger a resize event in a browser. So it will be an issue when browser zoom is okay. So there's two sides of this test. And this is one of the more severe ones, but this is pretty common. I would say that you maybe have to bring up two browsers. You maybe have to double check this in a few different ways to make sure we're getting the right information. Right. And that I see I got ahead of myself, but one other option within this, the page report in the platform, is you can switch to the HTML view. There are certain checks that don't show up visually in the page. So switching to the HTML view of that page, which we can kind of see in the screenshot a bit, will give you exactly where this problem is happening. And sorry, I ran out of space on this, but you get the idea, right? We have our issue here on the left, and then in the right, we can see the HTML of the page shown with a highlight of where that is specifically failing, which is very useful in a lot of different checks. So again, verify that through not just the visual interface, also look at it in the HTML. Travis.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on with this HTML view and talk about how often we're updating this information. So by default, it should be every 5 days. So we are caching your page and then having the ability to recrawl, rescan, respider this page. Depending on your user status, you'll be able to do that on demand. Then something that I also wanted to call out, if you're looking at the HTML view, that's not what it looks like on my live production website. What's going on here? I don't see it happen a ton, but it depends on when we're capturing that page. So when we're capturing and rendering that page, are we capturing a fully loaded page? And just knowing we have the ability, and it said this earlier, easy is relative, but it is pretty easy. It's parameter based in the back end. It's a delay page capture 2 seconds. So all of your scripts load, everything else loads. And I don't see it happen a ton, but I get that seeing support tickets pop up. Yeah, you're wrong because your HTML doesn't match up with my production. Well, yes and no. So just knowing too, if you're running into issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to our support team. We want to make sure that it's working properly for you.
Thank you, Travis. Yep, so checking the HTML view and the page report's an easy first step, right? When we're deciding if this is an issue or not. Some of them do require you to go out into the live site. So we don't give you like a CSS panel within this page report tool. So if it is a CSS property based issue, you may have to pop that page open dev tools and check it out that way. That make sense? Okay. And then of course there's the help center. This is an article I helped co-write on the text is clipped when resize rule, talking about how to test it. Can you tell it's a problem? Yes. So our help center has a ton of like how to or deep dives into what the check is actually looking for. I would say I would probably go directly to the help center if you have questions about what the check is actually looking for, if you see an issue and you're not sure about it. We're also authoring more articles about specific checks as well. And these are hopefully in a little bit more plain language than our alpha code check base, right? Which is what the check is actually scripted to do, which gets very technical. That is linked though as a resource for everybody to have access to as well, with a lot of code examples actually in it too. But Help Center is a little easier, maybe more user-friendly. All right. So is it a false positive or a broken page? I get a lot of false positives where the page is just, we didn't crawl it right. There's something broken about it. Our CSS file didn't load, like what Travis mentioned as well, that we may just have to delay that page capture on our end to get it to load correctly, because when we capture the HTML, CSS, JavaScript of that page, whatever we capture is what we run checks against. We're not running the checks against your live site. We're running checks against what we capture. So if it's not captured correctly, the check is not going to be accurate, right? So one really obvious way to tell if something's broken and you need a support ticket is this page report that I have up on the screen right now is broken, right? Like the CSS file did not load correctly. We are missing an asset of some sort. So we're getting an issue that's color contrast does not meet minimum requirement for the AA standard, but we're probably not getting the right color, right? Like in the page report, it's very visibly broken. It does not look like a coherent website whatsoever. So this is one before you mark this as false positive, before you say Siteimprove isn't accurate or whatever. Maybe we need a support ticket first to resolve this problem. We need to figure out why the page isn't capturing first, and then rerun our checks, and then we decide if this is still an issue or not. If we do that, we will if it's not an issue, it will disappear, right? It's not like going to stick around. If we resolve the underlying issue first, your results in that issues table will be more accurate. And your scores and everything else that goes along with it. So yeah, fix that broken page before proceeding. Page styles are broken if there's an error message in the platform or in the page report itself, because we'll get this fetch issue sometimes. That's because the crawl is likely bad. There's something happened to interrupt that. So we want to resolve that first before we go any further. We also get a lot of false positives, things like that for pages that just shouldn't be checked, right? So the crawler will find every single link that is on your website, like it or not, right? Even though you're like, no one's ever going to click on that, the crawler is going to find it. So if that page should not be checked, if it's a style guide, if it's something for your content authors to reference, but we found it with the crawler, we're going to run accessibility checks against it, and it's going to add up into your score as well. So if that's the case, we have exclusion processes. We can take that out of your crawl. We can say, don't crawl this page essentially, but if it's just hanging around out there and it shouldn't be checked, false positive process is not the right process. Telling us that this is inaccurate or not used is not a good way of resolving that problem, because the check is doing what it's supposed to do. However, it's a page is not user facing, perhaps.
Yeah, and this goes back to like easy's relative, but like if we're finding it, there's potential someone else can. We try and remove any duplicate pages out there, but the system, I call it, not just Siteimprove, but kind of dumb, being like, well, there's a bunch of parameters in place, sort or filter parameters, but it's the same page. We don't want to ding you over and over again for the same issues over and over if it truly is the same page. But if it has that unique URL out there and it's duplicated 1,000 times, which I see sometimes, especially when you get into sort and search pages out there, ampersand, question mark, blah, 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 same thing over and over. Well, let's exclude it, because then we can still report on the issue if we're capturing the right page. We improve the performance of the crawl, the performance of the load of the website that you're looking at. So there can be a lot of benefits, but just having the awareness or consciousness of, all right, we're excluding this, so we're not going to find issues on it. I do ask a support ticket for that though, just to save Siteimprove, to say, why'd you exclude this? Because what does happen is a year later, someone new will come in and be like, your crawler sucks, you didn't find these pages. Well, we intentionally didn't find those. So we like to have that record to go back on.
Yep.
Both. Yep. So we can do both.
At any level of your directory. Yeah.
It is just URL based though.
Yep.
So
We have a question? Yeah, let's get the mic. Sorry, just one sec. Just so I don't have to repeat it. I'm being selfish.
Just regarding the exclusions, there's like an option that you can check to exclude, and you want the support ticket. Is that what you said?
if you're a user and you have the ability to do it, no need to put the support ticket in.
Okay.
You're captured, but most users, their profile do not have the ability to put in exclusions.
Okay,
Uh,
and then we would need to do the support ticket.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't, I've realized I've asked a couple questions, then we go to the next slide. Do you talk about aliases?
I
coming up?
don't know.
Okay, so let's say you go, I don't want to exclude this, but I don't want accessibility reporting on it, but it'd be nice to know if that link is broken. You can also put in external alias is what we call it. We will check the link, we'll inventory the link, but we won't run our accessibility check, our SEO checks. We'll treat it like it's an external link on your website. So having that ability to customize can be beneficial too.
Mhm.
With that, now I'm gonna open up a can of worms. Met with someone recently where say, we have a lot of subdomains, but in our world, all of these subdomains are one site in my mind. I want to have them all as one site in Siteimprove. That's technically possible. We can have one crawl, one site in Siteimprove, indexing multiple subdomains. I wouldn't, I wouldn't go hog wild on doing that, because if you then end up with a site with 50,000 pages, that's going to take a long time to crawl. You're going to have some out of date information. Should it truly be seen as one site? Because there's other options to report on many subdomains together within the platform instead of combining it. But if it's truly, if we have 3 subdomains, they are one site in our world, it's under 10,000 pages, then we can look at consolidating and capturing it as one site in Siteimprove.
Cool. Oh, another question. Go ahead.
So earlier you had a page where you point out where the error occurred in the HTML.
Mhm.
Does it do that for JS too?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of wish it did.
Yeah, I think that was great.
That'd be nice. No, it's we're just taking the HTML page, rendering it into that page report, and then highlighting the node that the check failed on, right? So this, as the check does its script against all of the computed stuff, it'll tell you the node that errored out and highlight that within the HTML. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Oh, yes, I didn't describe my images. I'm sorry. So the screenshot here on this screen of fix the broken page before proceeding. Sometimes fixing that page is just as simple as hitting that recheck page link button at the top of the page that is highlighted currently with a big cursor pointing to it. That's honestly the first thing I always do before I submit a support ticket, do anything else, because sometimes it's just easily fixable by checking just that one page again. If that fails, if it's still broken, I would submit a support ticket because it's probably more systemic than that page having a problem. I often see this breaking, I will say, if it's like a singular page, it's likely that like some JavaScript was hanging on that page for too long and we captured it kind of in the middle of a process, or something like that, where it's the live site's fine, everything is fine, but the crawler just caught it at exactly the wrong time. Sometimes that happens. But easy to fix. All right. Okay, so the false positive process. I wanted to chat about this a bit. So I've been alluding to it a little bit before, but if the check is wrong, if there's a creative way that that page was developed in a way that we didn't expect, which does happen, it happens quite a bit. We do have a way for you to get away from that check to say, this is a false positive. It is not a problem. Your check just didn't find the right things, right? So I've told you all the ways to avoid this, but here we are. So within the page report, in that left-hand column that tells you what the issue is, what the occurrences are, all of that, I've opened up a occurrence of this issue. The Umami Food Magazine, by the way, it's our demo site. It's very nice. It gives me a couple of hints, like, but essentially what I've found after doing all those steps we talked about, verifying it in both Firefox and Chrome, with both browser zoom and the default font size increase, I've decided this is not a problem. Nothing is clipped. The text is still legible. The check doesn't quite see what the live browser is showing me. So there's a gear icon down at the bottom right corner of that occurrence. If you click on that, it opens up this little modal window that sits on top. And we have two radio options of dismiss as can't fix and dismiss as a false positive, with a open field to explain your decision. That's optional, and advanced options to apply this decision to all occurrences with the following CSS selector in a field to add a CSS selector. So I'm going to talk through all of this. Firstly, if it is a false positive, if it's something that the check is not seeing correctly, we want the dismiss as false positive radio option selected. This triggers a different process, and I'll dive into the steps here in a second. But essentially what you're saying is, this isn't a problem, get it out of my list, give me my points back. I want my points, thank you, right? That's what this one does. The other option of can't fix does not do those things for you. It's just, I don't want to deal with this, is what the can't fix does. It's a third party. I don't have control over it. Something of that nature, right? So dismiss as false positive. We've selected that option. We can leave a note and we can apply it in bulk with CSS selectors. But so this is a false positive process, very, very in-depth. All right, so you submitted that false positive. You said this occurrence is not an actual issue. Get it off my list. I want my points back. That occurrence is then hidden from your list of issues. That occurrence, I should say, not the issue as a whole. That occurrence of that issue is hidden once you submit that. No points are added or gained at this point in time, but it is sent to Siteimprove for review. And yes, a human, me, reviews them. So I will take a look at that occurrence, that issue, whatever it is that is sent into me. I will agree with you or not, and then I'll provide you feedback in that way. So yeah, that second step is the Siteimprove review. It's sent to a solution expert. Again, I'm pointing to myself. We also have one other person that does them too. It's not just only me, I should say. We review it, we approve it or reject it, and that's based on the occurrence level. And then I can add a support note in there to tell you the reasons why I disagree or agree with you. You'll be able to find that note. You can reference it. It lives on forever in the system unless you delete it. So you can always go back and reference them. So if I agree with you, if I approve that, those points that are associated with that occurrence are then awarded back to you. So we say, yes, have your points. We agree. And that issue remains removed from, that occurrence of that issue is removed from that list until we change it, right? And unless we undo it or bring it back in some way. So it will stay removed. It's essentially removing it for good. or we reject it, if we disagree with you, if there's some aspect of this testing that we don't, that you missed, that we don't agree with, if the check is doing what it's supposed to do, you just don't agree with it. I get those a lot. The issue then returns to your list, that occurrence of that issue returns to your list, and no points are changed at all at that point. So that's kind of the flow, user flow for this. It's much more involved than can't fix. It's much more involved than I just don't want to see it. We do actually review them. It does come into our queue. You will see them appear and disappear out of your list if you're just submitting them randomly. So we can also, as we saw in that panel, dismiss things in bulk. And there's a lot of confusion over this, so I did want to highlight it. We can dismiss multiple occurrences based on CSS selectors. So you have to know a little bit about CSS in order to dismiss in bulk, and I'm happy to help with that if you have questions. But we can essentially find a CSS selector for that node that failed and dismiss everything in that site that matches that. So it's site-based and it is check-based, right? So if I'm in one issue, for one site, if I dismiss in bulk, I will match everything in that site for that check using this. It does not go site to site in its current format. It's just for that one site that you are on, currently working in, and just for that check. So we're not like eliminating a lot of checks. We're not doing this across a whole grouping of sites. So keep that in mind as you go down this process. But this field for apply decisions to all occurrences with the following CSS selector accepts any CSS selection. So we can do by class or ID. We can do multiple selectors, so nested or multiple selectors on the same element to be more specific. We can do direct descendant selectors, adjacent selector, any CSS trick you can pull out, this will apply. You can also do wildcards. Please use those cautiously. I do that pretty regularly. If I just know this whole template has something that our check doesn't agree with, I will wildcard it out, but use that sparingly. I will double check it when I review your false positive. So in that field, we can see I've used the class of field __ item. And that matched 26 nodes within that page that I was applying this to. So that check will apply to all of those occurrences. So 26 occurrences, all with one submission of a false positive report. Super handy, especially if you have a lot of pervasive things that are not reporting correctly for that check. Any questions? Question. Good. Yeah. Can you, the question was, can you apply it to, that's okay, certain pages, or is it the full site? Yeah. So you cannot apply it to a page. You would have to do it by occurrence level then. So just submitting without the CSS selector, you'd have to go every occurrence, submit that false positive report through that page. Yeah. Otherwise, the CSS selector is the whole site. Yep. Yep. Another question. Gotta. Oh, in your HTML. Yeah. Yes. So you could change. Yeah, you could change it so that each page had a unique identifier in your HTML and then use that. Yes. You could also, if there was like a very specific thing about that page. So if you had a bunch of ancestor CSS that you could point to, like class names, for instance, you could chain those together in one long selector as well. So if it's like a link nested in a card, nested in a something, you could use all those class names to chain it together and be really specific. Yeah. Anything else? Keep going.
Sorry,
Oh,
quick
yeah.
question. How does Siteimprove know that it's hit every possible page on your website? Like how do you guys know you're covering all the pages? Is that a relevant question?
Go ahead. Yes.
Because I'm
Yeah.
wondering
That's a
stuff that I don't even know about, maybe you guys are hitting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really relevant question. And short answer is we don't know. As we're crawling through, we are trying to find everything that is unique out there. But gosh, it would be cool. I don't know of one out there, but like an orphan analysis tool. What are we missing? But we
good
don't.
coverage.
We don't have. So some of the things that we do, we recommend pointing to an XML sitemap. So if, depending on how updated you have that, or if it's a plugin based, but that's something that we can add in the kind of the backend configuration and extra index URL and XML sitemap in there, give it a little bit more control. And then I'm not going to put Christina on the spot, but within our platform, let's say visually one of the best spots to, I'm not going to make you go to it, but quality assurance, inventory sitemap is just a nice visual to see where are all my pages in folder base. And then buried in quality assurance summary check history, you're able to see at each completed crawl or link check, how many pages that we had. And then the previous 5 checks, you can see what was removed and what was added. So not exactly not what you're looking for,
Right.
but can give you more direction on an investigation.
And do we make you like an account for our website with different permissions or something? Like, how does that work? How do we work with Siteimprove to give you access to every type of link? Because some are for admins, some are for these kinds of users, maybe. Like, how does that work? Is there like a person assigned to our site that we work with, or how does that?
I'm going to ask Christina for some help on more of the fragment parts of it, but I'll try and answer the default or what
Yeah.
the non-technical as I am is we just point our crawler at your indexing domain, and then we're just going through the entirety of your HTML with the assumption that we don't have any exclusions in place or aliases in place, and just running our checks based on the entirety of that page and that HTML from it.
For any page that it requires a login, I know you have different, you have policies at UC that would dictate if we can sign in to that site behind a login screen or something like that. We do have the capability of doing that, but there's like personal identifiable information issues surrounding that. So that's a good question for your admins.
What I have seen, maybe this is somewhat, so echoing what Christina said, I just thought of another customer I'm working with is using Adobe Target. So then they're having A/B testing done with it. So how are they deciding what pages get served up to Siteimprove? So they've identified our user agent and then are trying to it gets fully over my head on how they're actually doing it. But similar with other A/B testing tools, they've identified our IP and user agent and are specifically serving up pages that they want us to find. Otherwise, we're coming in as trying to impersonate an actual user.
Mhm.
And then whatever your website serves up to a user with our IP is what we're getting by default.
Thank you.
Question back there?
So you're mentioning that you guys crawl and scan things that are unique. What about SPAs? So for those that don't know what an SPA is, single page applications.
Single page apps. Yes, so we require a routing engine essentially within there. The URL has to be unique for us to identify it as a unique page. So that's generally our advice. And if that's out of the question, then we find creative ways of duplicating that content somewhere else so we can check it potentially. I know we've gone that route before. Did you got anything? You want to add anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add. So exactly what she said, and then the creativity on it. So with some of that routing, if you can put a hash in the URL, that can go a long way for us to help identify it. Again, being able to just serve us up. XML sitemap's easy, but even if it's a orphan page with, again, it goes back to the unique links for it. So it can get really difficult, and it's worth investigating because it normally doesn't take one of our supporters more than 5 minutes to say, here are the options, or this isn't happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Question in the back. I feel powerful. I can just point and a guy runs a microphone. This is great.
Hi, Matthew Somerville from Riverside Health. I am not a Siteimprove expert by any means. I actually do security work, but trying to learn more. How does it work if there's a page behind a login, like it's an authenticated page? Do you cache credentials in Siteimprove to get past that, or what exactly does that look like?
I'm gonna pass that one to Travis.
So we can, but then it's UC policy on whether or not you're allowed to pass credentials for us and allow us to script in. We do not want to find PII. We don't want to store it, display it, host it. So that's one of the big things. I don't know the policy off the top of my head on if you do want to try and get us in there, but what happens is if we do not have credentials, we hit it, we may hit that login. Normally it's what coded as a button login or
Yeah, or we can pass a cookie, perhaps. We do that
Yep.
occasionally.
So pass a cookie, but otherwise, if we don't have credentials, we're just like a user that doesn't have credentials. We can't go any further in there. We're not trying to get any further to that content.
Question, another one? No, that's great. No, you don't want to hear me talk for an hour and a half.
I'd like
Trust
a
me.
few questions. So this one is while it's crawling, what happens when you encounter attachments or like downloadable material like PDFs and stuff?
Awesome.
Does it scan those or it just automatically skip those?
Yep, we find them and index them as downloadable content. Travis can speak more to that, maybe. Go ahead.
I guess a little bit more. I won't- What Christina said, but then depending on the type of file. So with PDFs, we are able to, if it's machine readable, we're able to link check within that PDF. So tell you if the link is broken or not, the links within that PDF. And then we run about 15 accessibility checks on PDFs. I don't think those have been updated for a while. I guess I'm not.
They're
very-
really, I would call them light accessibility checks for documents.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like also references to like Google Docs and stuff like that. Does it try to
Oh.
crawl those or?
Ooh.
Like, no, it's
Just the link to it.
Yeah.
So
Just the link.
I work with some states where they heavily into Google Docs and
Right.
we haven't been able to do a ton with them, especially, well, for them, they've authenticated a lot of them, which stops it. But yeah, otherwise we inventory, tell you where it is on your web page, the file size of it, file name if it has it. So
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
When I used to work in higher ed, that was very handy for us because we had certain faculty that would go crazy with, or I shouldn't say crazy, they would go wild with adding just links to documents in the site that they had, right? And so we could monitor that a bit with Siteimprove. We were actually a customer before I started working at Siteimprove. But yeah, so like you can get essentially a list of any linked downloadable content, very easy to kind of scan. If you have certain people, certain sites, certain places in your site that you need to monitor for that, it's very handy. Yeah. All right. Back to false positives. No. One thing to note about this false positive review process is that your false positive report will likely get rejected if you give me a very generic CSS selector. Because of the nature of how these work, they bulk dismiss this specific accessibility check site-wide. So if you submit a false positive for color contrast at the AA standard with just a CSS selector of div or like A, which would be any link in your site, I am going to reject it because that means we will never check your links for color contrast ever again on that site, which is not cool, right? So specific CSS selectors, please, is the title of the side, and that's me begging for that. But yeah, if that CSS selector is too vague, it will be rejected. It will dismiss site-wide. So it could eliminate that check for the entirety of your content on that site. So just beware that is something we do double check when you submit these as well. Our examples here were div, span, and A as CSS selectors. Those are way too broad. We need them to be a lot more specific. So using those class names, using that ancestor descendant relationship to become more specific with that report. Okay. And also leave me a comment. I read them. So in that, please explain your decision, which is an optional field in that panel for the false positive process. Tell me your reasoning behind why you're dismissing this. I do check them. I do read them. So sometimes they can be enlightening as to maybe like if you're missing a certain part of that check, or if there's a specific situation I am not aware of, without popping open the live site and taking a look. That field can actually be very informative for me as I do these reviews. So please do. All right. And then what if it is an issue, but we can't fix it, right? This tends to pop up. I alluded to this too, and it's very simple, but this tends to pop up with third-party content. If you have a third-party plugin, you don't own the code base, it's a script injected thing. You don't have a lot of control over it, and you just are sick of seeing those issues pop up within that widget. We can dismiss them as can't fix, which is different than a false positive. So a false means the check did something wrong. Can't fix is I can't resolve this problem. It's out of my hands, right? I see a lot of false positives come through that are like, this is a third party. I'm like, well, the check is doing what it's supposed to do. So I have to reject your false positive, but the suggestion then is always to mark it as can't fix. So within that panel that is opened in the page report again for that occurrence, on the little gear icon, that's just that top radio option, dismisses can't fix. You can again leave yourself or us a note. We don't review these. These are just for you. And then you can also dismiss in bulk with CSS selectors in the same way we just walked through with false positive. So you can then review those things in the activity tab that's on the left side of the Siteimprove platform. In the navigation on the left, there is a tab called activity. If we go into that tab, we can see two other tabs in that content of dismissed as can't fix and dismissed as false positive. So you can toggle between those two views, and you'll see every decision you've ever made on that site. And this is at the site level. So any decision you've made at the site level for either of those options, can't fix or false positive, will show up here. You'll notice the issue itself is there, who made the decision, the date that decision happened. You'll see if it's a single occurrence or a CSS selector in that column as well, and your comments, and then any support notes, statuses, so forth. So those little chat icons you can click on, they will open up a little dialogue, that pop-up tooltip thing that shows you that comment that was left. Question? And you set up notifications. Good question. No, you can't configure notifications. There is an automated support response that does happen when we end up closing the ticket that the false positive process generates. But you would have to be the site owner, account owner to receive that. Travis.
Great question. Something that was recently identified as a need.
Yep.
What's cool is our support team has I wouldn't call it an alert, but better visualization of what's happened in your account. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to say a date on it, but it's been requested to make it more visible to admins or account owners so they can see what's been happening on their account across all of their sites. So you don't have to go to each one individually, but question is very, very close to what has recently been talked to with Lucy and team. So hopefully more to come, but we definitely heard you and this helps too. So I'm glad you asked.
Yep. Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't repeat the question, but I think we covered it. That it's configurable notifications for this. Do not currently exist, but it is heard. Because we since I took over this process of reviewing the false positives specifically, we've been trying to leave really detailed support notes in the approval or rejection, especially rejection of them, so that you can reference it, use it as an educational tool. We often will link to the support or the help center, things like that. So there's actually some really good information we're trying to pass along and nobody knows it's there. So we're trying to fix that very quickly, so that you can see those support notes in a more obvious place.
Well, and that's a big part. Christina and I talked as she was putting this together, is this is something that we spent a lot of time on. It's not like UC and all the region or all the campuses are going crazy on this dismiss as false positives. Part of that is because a lot of people don't know it exists. And then having the ability to configure for those of us that have been with Siteimprove prior to this, it's, I guess, not new anymore, over 2 years old, but next gen accessibility, it removes some of that functionality and we've added it back. It's just not very visible. And this is more of advanced feature.
Yeah.
It's not fun to have someone come to me and be like, this didn't work for me. Your tool stinks because I couldn't do this. And then I go, it's fun to have that answer. If, well, actually we can, but that you didn't know about it, that's still an issue too. So.
Yep, I agree. So if you do like want to find where this is, the decisions for that site are what the statuses are, where we are on that per site, you can go to that activity page. A lot of people don't know that this exists either. So this is super useful to see those all listed out. And they will stay there unless we undo the whole thing. So if we undo the decision completely, that's the only way they disappear from this list. So. All right. Okay, so I'm briefly going to talk to you about potential issues, which is another part of our platform for everybody. And then maybe we can get into like other more fun things. No, this isn't fun. I'm gonna just be honest. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are like an automated checking tool. We run a script against your HTML, CSS of your site. That's a very yes or no thing, right? It has to be a yes or a no issue in accessibility. And that is a very small percentage of the WCAG success criterion that can be answered with a yes or a no. Does this image have alt text? Yes or no? That's something we can easily find and provide a yes or a no too. There are a lot more checks that require human input or decision-making processes. So within as a way of trying to extend that automation into some of those human necessary checks and criterion, we have this potential issue review process. So we've identified something that our script, our machine says, this looks like it could be an issue, but we need a human to review it and say, is it an issue? It is not an issue. So this is our tool for doing that. Why I mentioned this as well is that we get a lot of people focused on that DCI score in Siteimprove, right? It's the score generalized for your progress in accessibility. I have a love-hate relationship with that DCI score myself, to be totally honest with you. But it is there. It is a good tool for deciding how good of a job you're doing and your progress over time, right? I mentioned this false positive, or not this potential issue review, because this is often a place where points exist to be gained towards that DCI score, but you are not checked, right? So you'll be going through your issues list in the normal automated side of the tool, and you'll see that you're not quite getting to a certain level. You'll see that you're still missing a bucket of points values. They are very likely hanging out in this potential issue review area. And this is one of those places where once you go through it, clear these out of here, they're either an issue or they're not an issue, and they shouldn't come back, right? So this is good activity to go through just to get it off the board, in my opinion. Yeah, as you add sites or pages, as you add new content, they may show up here again. So it's worth coming back to and reviewing. But this is a place where you can gain a lot of value and take out some of the ambiguity, honestly, in the platform as well. So we have a potential issue here in the Siteimprove platform that I have clicked on. We're on the landing page for, and is there a minimum contrast ratio between text and background? You'll notice this was a similar check in the automated side that I brought up too. So there are certain circumstances in your code base and CSS applications that will trigger this question, right? Is it actually a problem? Sometimes it's a straight up yes or no, but sometimes there is a way that you've designed your page that makes it kind of a question mark. We can't necessarily measure the boundaries of this background to say that that text color and background color meet a contrast ratio defined in WCAG. So occasionally it will get thrown as a potential issue over here. You get all your normal information about it, where the conformance level is, your points to be gained, how many pages it is on, the number of occurrences that exist, and the responsibility of who may be in charge of fixing this based on our assumptions of your teams. But yeah, so you get a lot of good information here. You also get more of the WCAG under learn more. We explain what the check is looking for, kind of in plain terms there. But so what happens when you click into one of these potential issue reviews is we take you through what we call a guided review process. The issue here is their minimum contrast ratio between text and background. That text was identified as super easy vegetarian pasta bake. That's fun. But and then the item to review, we have posed a question to answer here, so that somebody doing this review, what is the background color? So for whatever reason, our check could not find the background color that's behind this text on your site. There will be, you know, like the normal page report, it will be identified in the visual interface of this page report as well. So you can kind of take a look at the visuals and the HTML view of that. But you have options to write in the hexadecimal color of the background in that field. You have an option to click on the box that is a color to pick a color out of a color palette. You can also eyedropper the page. So a lot of different skill set. You don't have to know the hexadecimal number, look in dev tools, that sort of thing. You can just eyedropper it. That's usually what I recommend people do. So you'd eyedropper on the page what that background color is behind the text that's been identified, and then save your selection. If there are multiple colors, so say you have text on top of an image, right, with no background color, you will want to add colors there. There's a button to add another color. You will want to add all of the colors that touch that text into that to make sure there is enough sufficient contrast across all of your text on that image. Little bit annoying, I understand. However, text on an image isn't the best practice anyway, so I'd recommend not doing that. But we can do that computation for you essentially within this tool. So you can eyedropper all of those pieces of that image, add all those colors, save the selection. It does a thing. By thing, I mean run script against it and do all that color contrast calculation for you. And then it decides if it is an issue or it is not an issue. So it's comparing those two color values together, the background color that you identified and the text color that we have saved in this case. If it is an issue, you'll get this notification that's on the left that says, is an issue, what's next, review another occurrence or fix this occurrence. So what's happening here on the back end is that once you've completed this guided review, done all of those calculations or had the script do those calculations for you, it is either moving it into that issues list, that table of issues associated with this check, or it is saying not an issue, it's complete, get it out of here, right? So again, super valuable for as an exercise to go through in this case. And then if it isn't an issue, you get that notification that's on the right that says, this is not an issue, what's next, review another occurrence. So it's essentially taking it out of your list for good. Lucy, hello. Need a mic? Does the crawler notice that there's a difference and it may need to be re-reviewed?
The next call comes and somebody went and put a new image in.
Mm-hmm.
Then come out of the result and say re-review.
Okay, does it come back and say the image is updated? I will say if the image linked is changed and nothing else about the page changes, it's probably not going to notice a change happened. However, if the structure of your page changes, it will be different, and Travis is going to jump into.
I think if the image link changes, so
Does
I
it?
think you said it a little bit different. If the
Yeah,
if
sorry.
the image file path changes,
Yes.
then it will be rechecked. If the image file path does not change,
Yeah.
that's where the issue will come into play, because we will recognize this exact same file type on there and we're trying to be smart and say, This file is the same and a decision's already been done.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, file path,
File path.
file path.
Yes, if you just replace that image in your CMS and use the same, it's called the same thing, it won't notice that change. I think that's what I was trying to say. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so going through these potential issues, just again, it's kind of a housekeeping item. I would say you want to keep this pretty clear because it's going to house a lot of points that are ambiguous and kind of floating in space. So so identifying these, going through them regularly, I think is a priority. Go ahead, Travis.
Exactly what Christina just said again, but also I feel like this is a good education opportunity. Get people involved to say, you know, yeah, we're working on automation. I'm on board with accessibility, but I'm not a manual tester. I don't know what to do here. Well, we help walk you through it. Try and tie in the automated versus the manual. And again, everyone can be able to do some testing. So it's a good opportunity. And then I know we talked a little bit last time on videos. There's a crap ton of points associated with videos because there's such a big user impact out there. Are you going into that at all? Or
No, I'm not.
Okay, good. So
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to,
Uh-uh.
I'm not stealing your thunder, but there's a big reason too why we still associate so many points with potential issues. Give you a call. I hear from some people saying, I don't want my resources verifying that this is not a problem. Well, how else are you going to verify it? We've at least called out that there's a video file out there. So having that quick review to say, yep, it has closed captions. There's an audio description on there, or this video is autoplay for 10 seconds. There's no additional information being conveyed. So again, it's such a big user impact and kind of just being defensive of why we attach so many points to that. But yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I totally agree, I guess, with that. And I do think too, if you are building an accessibility system of checking your digital accessibility of your site or whatever digital properties, these automated checks and partially automated checks, these potential issue reviews should, in theory, lighten the load of your manual testing efforts. Should you still do them? Absolutely. But if we've already gone through this potential issue review and had somebody verify through the Siteimprove system, if the video has captioning, if it is audio described, whatever those potential issues might be, theoretically, again, you should be able to lighten that time that's necessary for somebody to manually review your full site, because you're documenting it here. And hopefully those decisions are accurate. That's really the question mark in the system. But whoever is doing those reviews for you, it'll be important that they know, I guess, what the ins and outs are of that and what you're looking for. So again, those associated resources on that page, why is this an issue? We went over those earlier. Those will become really valuable educational tools for whoever's doing these reviews. Okay. So potential issues can be dismissed as only can't fix. You cannot, from the potential issue review process, say this is a false positive. We do that for a lot of reasons, but primarily not to clutter things. We want you to go through the guided review to decide if this is an issue or not, because likely, and I'm speaking generally, I guess, likely what's happening is that you're misunderstanding what the check is looking for. Whoever's doing this review is missing a piece of it in some fashion. And we don't want to clutter up your false positive review process that we went through with things that are maybe a misunderstanding, right? So, but you can dismiss them as can't fix in the same ways we were talking about earlier. You can leave a note for documentation purposes. And under advanced options, you can also use a CSS selector to dismiss those in bulk. So we can say, you know what, that's a third party. We don't have control of the code base, something. We should file a ticket, but we want it out of this list. You can still do that from here. Otherwise, though, we want you to go through the guided review process and have the computer decide if it's an issue or not, for better or worse, I guess, time-wise. But okay, so that's all the slides I had, but I know we probably wanted to cover a couple more things and we have time. So first of all, what questions do we have? I highlighted just some of the stuff in the platform. That's pretty default, I guess, but I'm happy to field any questions you might have for now. And then I think we wanted to show the browser extension as well. So go ahead, question.
Yeah, I have a question about the roles. So are those, I know for the issues, you can sort based on the responsibility of
Mhm.
the role. How are those roles determined and are they changeable?
That's a really good question. I will tell you they are not changeable currently. I was just going to get it to a screen that had them. So I've got the image back up here of the responsibility, and it'll have development, content writing, visual design, UX in there. We, I guess, made the assumption on the Siteimprove site to assign those role responsibilities to individual issues within the checks, automated checks. They are not configurable currently. So, yeah. Is that something you would like to see? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just to summarize that briefly is that customizing those roles would probably have a better benefit to the educational side of things. And so people doing that work and that fits outside of their role wouldn't become overwhelmed seeing issues that they don't have power to address. Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense. Good feedback that we'll take back to the team. To kind of have that, like, that's workaround right now. I shared it at the end of the last session, but the UC accessibility dashboard that everyone should have access to, that segments it down a little bit further. I think there's like 5 issues out there. Some are policy, but like image with bad alt text is one of them. I recommend looking at that, and you should be able to apply that to just the sites that you're responsible for too.
So, sorry, as the one of the 2 account owners for the Siteimprove account, I would welcome people coming to me with suggestions like that specifically. And I'd like to actually maybe form a committee where we can actually write something up for you, Travis, and work, or Travis, sorry, work with you on doing that kind of thing. Because one of my biggest issues is that, yes, there are role-based types of issues, but everyone is seeing all of them, and we really need to like have things just for the content creators.
Yep.
I think the developers, sorry guys, if any of you are developers in the room, you do need to see them all. Because
I
you do
agree.
need to know what the content creator will do. We have we have a saying on our team, creators will create. So, but it's really important. And I think maybe we should have a committee where we write up those kinds of suggestions for you, Travis. Yeah. And I welcome people to email me directly and to talk about that. It's lgreco@berkeley.edu.
Yep, I agree. And as a developer, I agree. You have to see everything. Sorry. Often the developer's role in all of this is to enable other people to do things correctly, right? So yeah, you have to see it all. Sorry. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, excellent.
Just kind of interested, what maybe one of the biggest false positives that was actually valid that has come up for you all to manage?
Yeah.
Besides the users reporting false
Great
positives,
question.
not that problem.
Great question. So so let me make sure I have it the correct way. So a false positive that ended up being actually an issue. Okay. Yep. So I would say the ones that I get frequently are role within a required context, or those container is empty is a big one as well that comes up. Sorry, I'm citing checks now. I was promised I wouldn't do that. He did. He asked for it. So those tend to be ARIA based accessible rich internet applications, which is a tool we can use as developers to make things accessible in the code base. It's overused. I could talk about it. Yeah, first rule of ARIA is don't use it. That's from the documentation itself. It's a more confusing aspect of ARIA that like certain elements that have certain roles require certain children, or certain child roles require a parent role. So they'll look at that issue. You'll have an unordered list element in HTML with divs inside of it, right? You'll get the container is empty. Check, error, throwing an error in your face, right? People are like, but there's content there. It's not empty. But in reality, it is saying it is empty because unordered list element requires a list item child. It has to have at least one. Otherwise, it's not a list. It's a list of nothing, right? I thought it was one. I mean, yes. Usability wise, yes, requires two. HTML spec wise requires one. It should be noted. But they'll see that check and say, that's a false positive. It's there's clearly stuff in that container, but in reality, we're looking for a child of a list item in there. So we'll tend to argue about that. And I'll reject it, and then it'll get resubmitted, and I'll have to do a consultation call with them. But yeah, that's a common one. Accessible name and visible name do not match is another one as well. So well-meaning people using ARIA labels on things, but not front-loading the ARIA label with the visible text in a button or a link. You need to front-load it for voice dictation software so that somebody looking at the user interface and activating a button through their voice knows the name of that link, right? So the visible text has to be first, and then you add additional information to it. Yeah, that's a common one. Any others? More questions?
Ann Lytle, UC Berkeley. I'm a developer, and maybe this is a question more for Lucy, in which case let me know and I'll email you. But we have a number of websites and most of them display PII data. We have one that doesn't, but my question is about, like, I'd really like to use Siteimprove. We've never used it, but the sites we have that require more security, you have to be on campus or be on a VPN to access. They're all behind a login. And one of them, for example, like you can go to a page for an individual student, it displays all their data. We have a fake student that we could provide the URL for. So like, is there a way for Siteimprove to like get behind a VPN, and once it does, can we specify like an individual URL for it to hit so it never hits any page with PII data, before ever using it? Okay.
Yeah, I brought up the Chrome extension, and she's a mind reader. Travis, did you have something
with
about VPN?
VPN will be tough, but I work with a lot of customers that just serve up a sample, a non-existent user, to use that as sample data. So there's potential, but yeah, follow up with Lucy, and then Lucy follow up with me.
Chain of command. Yes. Also, if you are a developer doing work, something I do all the time, and I did before I worked for Siteimprove. So like, no, not trying to sell you anything, obviously, not a salesperson, but I use the Chrome extension for Siteimprove all the time. Still today, I still use it all the time. So it sends no data to Siteimprove, so it's fairly, I'm going to say fairly safe because nothing's safe, but nothing in the world. But sorry, got dark. But it doesn't do all the checks. I will caveat this demo that I will do right now, but it does the majority of the automated checks that are in the platform. It does not do the potential issues or anything of that nature, and it doesn't send any data to Siteimprove, so you won't see it in the platform. You'll essentially not be able to track any history or anything like that with it, but it's a super useful tool when you're doing development work. I use it all the time. So I'll show you it very quickly. So I've brought up one of our demo sites, the Umami Food Magazine. Yes, sounds lovely, right? It's just a homepage currently. And I'm in the Chrome browser. So I will run our Siteimprove browser extension, which you can just download from the Chrome app extension store, app store. I forget what they call it these days. I was like, hopefully I'm still on the internet. Yes, good, excellent. So it launched this other window that is associated, kind of tethered to that homepage. And you will see it says Siteimprove Accessibility Checker, and we have identified 5 issues out of our automated check just on this homepage. So we can see that the text is not included in ARIA landmark, page does not start with a level 1 heading. AAA, which is line height, is below minimum value that we might ignore, to be totally honest. Text is clipped when resized, my favorite. Check. And then color contrast does not meet the enhanced requirement, which is again a AAA thing. We can filter out those that we do not want to deal with. So on that, you can set a conformance level within this tool to only show me like level A and AA. I can apply those filters, and then you'll see we only have that text is clipped when resized, our favorite check. Yeah, so then 4 minutes. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so then when I'm here, I can open up that issue. Text is clipped when resized. We get all of that description text we looked at in the platform. So the entire thing is out here for free, not associated with the platform. But it gives us that description. It even gives us the why is this an issue with all those related resources that we talked about earlier as well, and the abilities affected, which can help you prioritize them perhaps. And then below that, you can see the occurrences, right? So then if I highlight this, choose that occurrence, it will actually scroll down and highlight that on the page for you, all within the browser extension. If I am to open up DevTools, it's really hard to do this with one hand. Okay, I'm in dark mode. It's really fun. Presenting is a temporary disability. I agree. Right. So I opened up DevTools, and now this Show in Developer Tools button is available, and I can click on that, and it will actually scroll me in DevTools down to that node that is failing. So then I can deal with it. And in this case, I would want to go find that overflow hidden and remove it, very likely. Okay, this demo site's annoying, so I'm not going to do it. I didn't build it. But essentially, then I can go play with it in DevTools, and I can actually see the results live. Let me find a nicer check. Since I have a Okay, so line height is not a minimum value is being flagged for AAA. So let me like adjust the CSS. Oh, I am. I can hit that recheck button and it should disappear, although it is not behaving appropriately right now. Live demos. Should have never done it. There we go. So I used a unit and I shouldn't have. So 1.5 times whatever the unit is in line height. I recheck that page with the recheck button, and you'll see that there are no issues here anymore. So it's a really easy way to play around in DevTools as you're building, and check your work as you go. So I use it all the time. Everybody can download this. It is free. You did not need, it's not associated with your account. Yeah. Lucy. Let's see, you want the stick mic? Yep. No, that's not mine, it's yours.
Oh. All right, so what did everybody think? All right. I want to thank everyone for showing up, but most importantly, I want to thank Travis for an excellent session at the beginning and engaging with everybody. And I'm so sorry I missed most of your session.
It's okay.
Sorry, guys, it was a very important meeting, but what I came back in the room, I'm going to tell you, I've been along this journey for a long time and I learned things Siteimprove can do in just 5 minutes that I didn't know it could do. So Christina, Travis, and you could pass on to Tyler. Thank you for coming. You can visit them in the exhibit hall. They'll have a table all the time the exhibit hall is open. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of UC Accessibility. We've got 14 more sessions. If any of you are free from 1 o'clock to 2:30 this afternoon, over in the Disability Cultural Center, over in the Hearst Field Annex, we're having a bit of a gathering celebrating accessibility at UC, sponsored by our ADA coordinator. And on behalf of the Electronic Accessibility Committee, go forth and be accessible.